Shalom and welcome to another edition of Our Daily Bread. This is a special Holy Day edition. So today is Shavuot 2011-12. And my message for this year's Shavuot is called Learn from the Seasons Before. And, I'll start off by saying Hag Sameach to everybody. And I hope that you are having a wonderful Shavuot as we finished up the 7 Sabbaths or weeks and are now on the 50th day. There's a lot of interesting things about this holy day. One thing that I start off with right away that's interesting is that, there's not a lot of information about Shavuot as far as what we're specifically supposed to do. And I know that there's some traditions out there. Some people say that it's symbolic of the giving of the law. And that's kind of just roughly taken from the time, the third month, that it was that was tied to the giving of the law, and it gets into some kind of interesting things, but it's not directly connected. I mean, a person, can certainly try and draw a connection there. But I mean, when we look at the concept and the foundation of the first fruits, we're talking about the first fruits of the wheat harvest. And so I think it's everybody's duty and kind of responsibility to kind of look at the holy day and say, not just go through the traditions and that many times are not even directly connected to the text in any way, and really say, okay, what is this holy day about? What are all the verses on it? And what do I see there? So my message this year is called Learn from the Seasons Before. And the concept here is about the structure of Shavuot, which is essentially it's the first fruits of the wheat offering. Now, what is the wheat harvest is the second harvest. So the barley harvest is the first harvest of the year. And that centers around Passover or Pesach. And so what we see here is that this is a time where we're going to get the first fruits of the second harvest. And so by assembling kind of what's going on, I think it helps you a lot to understand, what should we be thinking about, what should we be doing. First fruits at any time is a very interesting thing because it's really, to me, considered kind of a blessing. The first fruits are a symbol of or a measure of what's to come. They're a small portion of the coming harvest. And the first ones, which also make it interesting. We're going to talk about that today. So I'm going to start off, we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of how seeds learn from harvest to harvest. How do the seeds change? And the seed is both the Word of God and it's also the children of God, so it can represent both. And we're going to see how the Word of God grows within us, just like the parable of the sower, from harvest to harvest, and also how we grow and change and should be changing in between these holy days. And then we're going to talk about the going beyond the norm and what kind of the role of the first fruit is, and see that if we're talking about the children of God, then what do those first fruits represent? Who do they represent? Are they something to strive for? And then we're going to talk about the roles of the first fruit overall. So we start off with the concept that seeds learn. And I don't know, some people may not know this because we're kind of removed from an agricultural culture. But seeds learn, and what happens is seeds will pick up. That's why a lot of times they save seeds, because the heirloom seeds, the older seeds, they'll pick up traits of, it's almost like having an experience or a memory. So if there was a drought and they take sometimes seeds that have gone through tough times but still survived, and they will use those seeds to plant new crops because they'll be resistant to drought, so they're not going to be as fragile as a seed that's never been through that. So seeds have a bit of a memory. And over the years, just like a wise person, the wiser, the more resilient, the more strong those seeds are. And you can see that a lot with Israel. It's the same way. Israel's been through a lot of tough things. This year, if you know our personal story, we've been through a ton of very tough times. This year is probably the worst year of my life so far. You know, we had my wife, you know, almost died multiple times, and 2 of my children almost died. And we went through a lot of difficult things, a lot of difficult times, one thing after another. You know, having to move and just so many struggles and different things that just keep coming one after another. And, you know, when I looked back and I reflected, because Shavuot's really a time to be thankful, to look back. You look back from the time of the last harvest and also from last Sukkot, right, which is the wheat harvest. So from that point, after the wheat harvest, you have this whole year that builds up until you get to the first fruits, where it lets us know we're getting ready to come back into this season of joy, this wheat harvest, this final harvest. And look back over the last year and see what's happened. And this first fruits offering is the best. So you're offering up, in my interpretation, it's a time of thanksgiving, to be thankful for everything that's happened since last Sukkot. And then in particular, you can even break it down into what's happened since Pesach. What have you learned and what have you grown as we transition from the barley harvest into the wheat harvest? So there's 2 interesting things about the seeds learned, this concept of seeds learned. And one thing is that I think there's an expectation of growth. So when you see the first fruits are saying, here's the first ripe fruits that have come up, and we have an expectation based on this harvest of first fruits of how good the crop is going to be. How, you know, it takes me back to what Mashiach said, you know, when he said the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. So he's looking forward, right, and saying, you know, here we're going to have this big harvest, but we need the workers. And this is kind of almost a hint to this concept of first fruits, which are the expectation of future harvest or growth. And I think that YHWH has this, it says in John that he is a gardener, and Israel is the vine, right? And Mashiach is the true vine. And I think there's an expectation when we think about the agricultural world and we think about the gardener of growth. This is really the expectation. This is one of the things that I find very lacking in the Messianic movement and Christian Judaism. Judaism probably better than most, but in some ways, you know, they run into other problems because their growth, to me, tends to be more in rabbinic teachings than in actual Torah study. So it's easy to kind of lose track and get caught up in studying the Mishnah or the Talmud and kind of forget that, again, because they see that as equal to studying the Torah and don't know that those are just commentaries on the Torah and they're not going to be as pure. It's kind of like the Talmud and the Mishnah. It's a great commentary, but they're a middleman, right? They're a filter that somebody else had the Torah, and then you had the sages, and they interpreted that Torah. And then you're the third person over here removed, so you got the true Torah down here, right? And then you have the interpretation of the sages through the Mishnah and the Talmud and everything, and then you come on over here, and you're going to get that. So you're missing a connection, whereas if you remove that, you can go straight to the source and study the Torah yourself, and then use that commentary as a second witness to your own witness. So if you studied the Torah, then you have that witness of what you see in the Torah and what you've seen right from the Word of God. And then you can compare that to what they saw. And yes, they are wise, and maybe they've studied the Torah their whole life, and there's traditions there and all that, and that's great. But the problem is that many times it becomes, well, they did the work for me, so I don't need to do the work, I just need to copy off their paper. And I think that that's part of the flaw of that understanding in Judaism, is that it doesn't take into account that they may be wrong. It doesn't take into account that you have nobody checking them to determine if they're correct. Whereas if you have more people going straight to the same source they went to, you may find, oh wait, somebody over here found out that that's not a correct interpretation in comparison to the scope of the whole Torah, and here's why, and then you have that safety net. But there's no safety net when everybody sits in the pews and says, well, we're going to listen to the pastor, we're going to listen to the rabbi because they're probably smarter than I am. When you do that, that is exactly what it's talking about in the New Testament as building your house on the sand. The sand represented the children of Israel. And the sand also represents small bits of truth. But it's not the whole combined truth, which is the rock, the solid thing. It's not little bits. And so when you build your house on that, it can seem solid, but a wave can come crashing and take that away from you. So I think there's an expectation of growth and learning. And as a father, as a gardener, I think that you have this concept where he expects you to grow and learn and not to be lazy. In the agricultural world, there's no place for laziness. If you don't plant at the right time, when the time comes for harvest, you won't have any food and you will starve to death. That's how it works. If you didn't do, the model of the first fruits is that they were the first ripe fruits. They were the first ones to basically pop up, to have the growth, to show that they did that. And those are what is offered to YHWH. And those are set apart during Shavuot and during the first fruits and Pesach to be, even though the harvest is still commemorated, but the first fruits have a special place. And this is kind of this concept that the first fruits represent the best of the coming harvest. And those are people who, like right now, who study Torah, who take the time when other people are too lazy, and who make studies and who build things and do good works for people who need them. Like eSword is a great, Rick Myers, I hope YHWH blesses him abundantly, because he created this software program that's free that allows you to study the scriptures and do word searches and do all of these wonderful things. You can see it at e-sword.net. If you haven't heard of it, download it. It's an awesome program. It's what I use, and it's easily the best Bible study program out there. And other programs that charge $200 and $300 aren't as good. And this one's free. And you can download all the Bibles that you want, commentaries, and there's some other ones that you have to pay for, specific ones. But most of the pay-for ones aren't worth buying anyway. They're more, they're not the core foundation of what you need anyway. So the thing is that he did a great work. He's kind of, to me, he would be an example of a first fruit. Somebody who went there and put the time and energy in to build something that's going to reap a big harvest in the future. But, he's a standout because he did this, and spent the time and the investment, and that's what agriculture is about. You know what I mean? It's about putting in the work for the future benefit. And so I think there's a huge blessing for those people, and I suggest that you be one of those people that doesn't wait until the harvest comes to think, oh, I should have planted, oh, I should have done my work. Not those people like the virgins who have no oil in their lamp and wait until the door's open to say, oh, now I need to go run and get prepared when it's too late. You should have already been prepared. So the first fruits represent the future blessing. And also these seeds, they also represent the learning to survive. So these first fruits are these strongest, just like your first one is called the beginning of your strength. Your firstborn son is the beginning of your strength. And because they open up the womb and the birth canal, first it's hardest, the actual birth process is hardest for them. It'll be easier for every subsequent child after that. And so their life and everything was more in danger in many ways. And for them to push through and to survive, they become, it actually, part of the difficulty actually creates the strength of that firstborn and gives them some of that strength that most firstborn children have. So what you see is you see this concept that the people willing to go out there and put in the work and do these things first, they have a strength. The seeds that have suffered through the drought have the strength that the other seeds don't have, that haven't suffered. And Israel, by going through all these difficult things, also has a strength of a nation and the resilience of a nation that other nations simply don't have because they haven't been through as much. So we go to the second point of this concept that it's of the increase from the last harvest. And this is what I believe that we're responsible to learn, to have that learning of the seed, that growth from the last harvest. So what did you learn from the last, since Pesach? I mean, can you sit down? When I write out an example, one of the things that we do for Shavuot is we have our Shavuot declaration, as you can see here. And what it is I just write out the tithe that we've earned since Shavuot, and you can also do from Pesach. So from Shavuot, from wheat harvest to wheat harvest, and from the last harvest, the barley harvest, to the wheat harvest, and then underneath it are listed the things that I am grateful for, and then also the messages, the studies, right? This Word of God. When we study the Word of God, it goes into us, right? The seed does, just like the parable of the sower, and out of it comes our studies. And when we do a study, it's like bringing forth fruit of the Word of God. And so the Word of God is supposed to bear fruit, and so I count that as our Torah studies are a type of fruit. So what I do is I mention right underneath there, I mention all the Torah studies I've done since Passover, because those are the first fruits of my newest studies on the Word of God, the newest fruit that's come forth since Passover, and looking forward to then at Shavuot, I will list all of the first fruit messages plus all the continued messages I've written up through Sukkot. And, you know, I'm a real big fan of writing a message. I think everybody should be writing a message. Everybody can sit down and write 3 or 4 sentences even. It doesn't have to be some scholarly exposition. But if you read the weekly Torah portion, it should bear fruit in you. You should have read it and then write down, here's what I thought. Could be some simple questions. Oh, I just thought that was interesting about the red heifer. I wonder, you know, if that's going to come back. Could be, you know, some observation you made. Could be a more in-depth written message about looking at everything that happened and trying to break down. I mean, to me, everybody should be doing this because that's your proof, that's your fruit. That's saying, if God gave you that portion of text for that week, at the end of the week, that portion didn't just come back empty. It's just not remaining the Word of God, but something you bring to it, right? You bring to it some fruit. So it went into you, and out came these thoughts, out came these questions, out came this study. Whatever it is, I think people will be highly blessed if they, every week, especially if they're reading the weekly Torah portions, should jot down a little something, and that becomes their fruit. Their offering to God. Hey, you gave me your word, and here's what I've returned to you out of it. It didn't, you know, just like the parable of the talents, I didn't just bury it. It didn't just come in one ear and go out the other, and bore nothing new. And I just listened to people do the reading, but it actually produced something. Again, goes back to what we first talked about the expectation of growth. And when you look at the holy days, this is what they're about. They're both sets of holy days, both sets of harvest. There's a first fruit, there's an expectation of that first growth, and then the full harvest coming in. So the third point I'll talk about is going beyond. And that means just exceeding the average. This concept of the first fruits is these come up first. These are the strong ones. These are the best usually. That's why they're offered to God. The first fruits are, and then they're given to the priests. So they get the best of the land. There's a whole bunch of models here. But it really is about comparing yourself. Are you going to be part of the harvest? Or are you going to be part of the first fruits? Mashiach has it talked about, that him being like a first fruits. He was the best. He came first. He did those things. He lived the Torah correctly 100% before all these other people. Now he's gonna help them and make it easier for them, just like the firstborn does, to be able to observe all the Torah and keep all that. But there's a special blessing in being that first fruit. And so don't limit yourself to saying, well, I'm just going to be part of the harvest, I'm just going to come in at the last minute. Go out of your way. If nobody else is studying the Torah and writing a message every week, that's a great example for you to do that. That way you're like a first fruit. You're producing fruit before everybody else is, because everybody else isn't yet. The land has not produced the fruit. Eventually they'll realize that they're responsible, right? When they have to. There's a difference from doing things when you have to and doing things before you have to. And doing things before you have to, being prepared, all these biblical concepts, like the virgins and the ones who had already prepared the oil in their lamp before they needed it, and the ones who waited till the last minute. See, there's an ongoing pattern in the scriptures that'll tell you that if those ones who are first, those ones who do what no one else is doing, who are righteous when everyone else is wicked, who are observing the Sabbath when nobody cares about it, like Noah when he's building the ark even though nobody thinks there's any problem, like Lot when he came out of Sodom before it was destroyed. These are all people who were paying attention. Avraham, who left out and followed God before anybody else. Willing to give up everything for him. I mean, all these people who are considered great in the scriptures, these are people who, like the prophets, who went in when everyone else was doing idolatry and said, no, we shouldn't be doing this, like Caleb and Yahushua, who said, hey, we can take this land when everyone was saying it was too hard. You always have this pattern over and over again in the scriptures, and these are first fruit patterns. And so the point is you have to exceed the average. Don't be average. Don't be like everybody else who's sitting around being lazy and not doing their Torah studies and not producing any fruit. The final point that we'll talk about, learning from the season before us, and see, this concept when I say don't be average, is all you have to do is learning from the seasons before you is to look at the people who went before you in the Torah. Learn from them. You can see who the first fruits are, and you can see that God blesses them. And you can see that sometimes the people wait till the last minute. They end up being punished. They end up not even getting to partake. They're not welcome or partaking in good. Sometimes they're cast away, just like the parable of the talent. He went and buried the talent and brought it back. I mean, he didn't cause loss. He didn't lose it. It didn't diminish. But he was considered a wicked servant. It was taken away from him, even though he didn't make it any less. Problem was, he didn't produce fruit. And he didn't use that time, right, that he was given to provide increase. See, he said even you could have put it in the bank and got interest. There could have been some increase. That's what he was looking for, is that fruit out of the seed, that it didn't come back empty the same way it went in. And so that's a big message that we have to understand for this time of Shavuot. These times of first fruits are a time for us to kind of remember that there's some expectation of growth, that we need to have increased from the last time of the harvest, that we need to go beyond the average people and be the first to pop up, be the first to take charge, be the first to produce something, even if no one else is yet, if the other seed is just sitting in the soil. And the last part is the role of the first fruits, which is really from here to Sukkot. The Shavuot is a time where it's the first fruits of the wheat harvest. So you have, here's the first fruits from here, and it's counting up to through Sukkot, which is this great harvest, the final harvest of the year. And in between that time, of course, we're going to eat Yom Teruah, and we're going to eat Yom Kippur. We're going to have some judgment and warnings and judgment, and then the final harvest. And the people, like I said, who are the first fruits, they aren't waiting until, right, Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur. That might be the regular harvest time for the rest of the wheat. You see, they're waiting till Judgment Day to say, oh, now I got to produce fruit. Now I have to be fruitful. But they're waiting till the last minute before the great ingathering, when judgment comes in these difficult times, how much better to be harvested and already presented to God in advance as part of that first fruit offering, to say, look, I didn't wait until, fire and brimstone are coming down to figure out that my ways are wicked, or that I need to listen to God's words. Like Paro, I didn't wait until the death of my firstborn, till the continuation of my life has been cut off, and then you start to submit yourself and humble yourself to God's words and commands. That a lot of people are going to come in on that time. But the wise ones were the ones just like Israel, who is there a model of the first fruits during Pesach, because they were willing to obey and put the blood on their doorpost. When, everybody else, Paro and his people, a lot of them, were not willing to listen to God, right? They could have went in the house of one of the Israelis or applied the blood on their doorpost. They could have done that, and the angel of death would have passed over them. But see, they waited until judgment time, and then judgment time came and already caused them harm, the destruction of their firstborn children. And they were weakened by that. Their greatest strength was removed. And it wasn't until after that that they were humbled. But why wait until your own destruction before you're humbled before Elohim? So that's what we can learn from the seasons before us. Learning from the seasons before us is, the seasons are the Torah. Those are the seasons. That's where you see the Word of God, the seed, going into the earth, the men who came before us. And you can see those that were wicked and those that were righteous. This Torah is our experience as a seed, as a child of God. And we are to learn from those droughts, those times of plenty and the times of famine. And we're supposed to learn from that. And that's supposed to be imparted into us as an heirloom seed, as an inheritor of the Word of God, to be a child of God and to carry on that lineage. We're supposed to, there's the expectations that we take that and we learn so that we can survive during our time of drought. And that also, that more importantly, that we can not just be average, not just be one of those people who made the golden calf and say, yeah, but I'm part of Israel. Don't brag about just being part of Israel. There's many people who are part of Israel who are also doing stupid and wicked things. If you want to brag because you were like Caleb and Yahushua, who stood up and said, no, we're going to do the right things. We're going to not be like everybody else. The 10 other princes said we can't do it. And I'm going to be one of the 2 out of the 12, the minority, those first fruits that stood up and said, no, we can do this, and obeyed God when it was not popular, even among his own people, to do more, to go and exceed what we are required to do. So that is how we learn from the seasons before us. This is how we become the smart, resilient seed, the good seed, goes into the land, and we can thus become the first fruit, the strongest of the seed, and go out and be presented to God, waved before him, and accepted, and be the portion to the priests, those who are closest to God, who will love us, and we will be their part because we were willing to be the first fruits. So I hope you have a wonderful Shavuot. I hope that this message was a blessing to you and challenges you to be more, to grow more, and to do more. And until next harvest, when we get to the full harvest of Sukkot, I pray that you will work diligently, and that will be enough to bring you through Yom Kippur, and so that we can rejoice before YHWH and all that he's blessed us with. Till the full harvest, I will say Shalom.